There we go, finally unmuted. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today, I'm going to be talking about scaling an imaging core facility to meet growing demand and evolving faculty needs. And I want to start off with a little disclaimer that I'm not an expert in growing facilities. I'm just telling you my experience. I started here about 9 years ago, where it was just me, a core of one. And since I've hired on 3 employees and expanded our services quite a bit. And so I'm going to tell you some of the things that I've learned over this course of 9 years. Okay, so a healthy core facility, especially a light microscopy core facility that has such expensive equipment in it, really needs intention to grow in a way that we want. We can all say that we have more users or more instruments, but that doesn't mean that you have a better core. And if you have an increased percent time booked on your instruments, that doesn't necessarily mean that you've had healthy growth. So a good question to ask yourself is, why are we growing? So there's some immediate reasons to grow, like new PIs were hired. This is what happened in my case. We had a cluster hire of PIs that wanted some new instruments purchased for them when they were hired, and it just became too much for one person. Maybe you've earned someone has earned an equipment supplement grant. This has also happened in my facility where we had the Institute match equipment supplement grants for the addition of a new spinning disc confocal. Maybe somebody needs a new type of technology that you don't have in the core yet. Your data storage and transfer infrastructure is insufficient, or maybe you're coming up into the time where you're sunsetting old instruments that can no longer be on service maintenance, or something breaks. But natural growth doesn't always mean healthy growth, right? It can be unhealthy for lots of reasons. Um, larger than Longer than normal wait times for instrument access. You want to have your equipment calendars not booked out months in advance. Consult creep is how many times have you been at a microscope with someone where they're like, oh, can you help me really quick on this? Can you just show me this? And you're there for an hour or 2 hours longer with them. Maybe your staff is spending time troubleshooting more than they are enabling the science. And you also want to have time for protected time for your staff so that they have personal learning time as well as scheduled downtime for things like maintenance, QC, as well as unplanned downtime. Another thing that's not ideal is when staff expertise is concentrated into one person. This happens all the time in cores of one, but ideally you would be able to cross-train with someone else. And all of these things can lead to delayed publications, which in general makes the PIs that you work with unhappy. So growth is not a linear process, as we might think of it. It can come in waves, it can go slow at times and fast at others. It's generally thought of as an S curve of growth, but realistically, growth over a long period of time is multiple S curves on top of each other. And what you want to do is really define the science that you're growing for before you meet those growth goals. So one way to do that is to define a mission statement. The mission statements exist to clarify your purpose, to tell the who, what, and why of why you exist. I would say that if you don't have one, you should make one. Make sure that your mission aligns with your institutional priorities as well as the user demand that you have coming into your facility. If you have people working for you, try to co-create this mission with them. I would also recommend co-creating values that your core shares. And if possible, try to shift the focus from just access to microscopes to outcomes from the microscopes. Another thing is clearly deciding what you will not support. There are types of microscopy that maybe your core does not have. You have an identity to your core, right? You can't be everything everywhere all at once. So are you routine fluorescence versus advanced modalities, home built versus turnkey? Screening versus hypothesis-driven imaging. Do you perform sample prep or do you work with a histology core? Are you able to perform image analysis for people or do you train them to do their own? Do you interpret their data for them? Are you willing to come up with new methods? These are all different questions that you want to ask before you define your own mission statement. Also, you should know your users. No user is created equal to another, right? You might have a set of current users, and you might know that there are some people that are just waiting for the right project to come by and they will use the core, but they're not there yet. You can identify people that are power users. They can do everything on their own. They come in all the time. They're trustworthy partners. Maybe one-off users, which you're going to have to keep an eye on a little bit more. And then there's what we call hidden users. So people that are doing it themselves, but they're doing it badly, and you need to help them. Um, we can put this into a couple different user archetypes. That's not necessarily needed to grow your core, but it does help to understand the types of users that you're encountering. So I would say that in a light microscopy core facility, there's three main types of team members. You're going to have a leadership, a technical operations, and a computational person. This is if you are able to grow your facility to that extent. The core director should be scientifically embedded. It should be a visible collaborator, not purely an administrator or a gatekeeper. Not all cores have a core manager or a core director. Sometimes it's called a core manager. Sometimes a core manager is under a faculty. Everybody's situation is a little bit different there. Then for me, when everything became too many instruments for me to handle all of the everything by myself, we hired on basically a right-hand person. So somebody to do technical operations. They're deep modality experts that are on the daily operational backbone of the core. And then lastly, I was able to hire in a computational person. This is somebody that comes to meetings before projects happen to talk about image analysis informed acquisition. And it happened to be that this person was so well received by our institute that we've hired a second person into my core. And I would like to note that career pathways, as in like growth in these career roles, is extremely important for people. If you want to retain that expertise, you're going to have to give people a way to grow. Unfortunately, when you grow your team, it's not always linear either. The Tuckman team development model has been widely used. It talks about forming, storming, norming, and performing. And then there's a fifth point, which is either called adjourning or mourning. But forming is when you're getting acquainted. Everyone's being very polite to one another. You're building your relationships, clarifying values. However, I'm sure you've realized that when you add a person, there's going to be a little bit of conflict. So that's the storming phrase. Conflict and tension arise. People are assertive, clarifying their roles, and they're trying to resolve the conflicts. But you will get back to a point where you are norming. So you're cohesively developed, you've established routines, you have mutual respect for one another. And then to the point where you're performing at your highest, operating efficiently, making decisions, problem solving, mentoring, and there's really a good backbone of trust there. I can tell you from my experience that every time I've hired a new person into the core, we've gone through some version of this forming, storming, norming, performing. So that has no reflection on the person in charge. It's really just bringing people together is sometimes difficult. Next, you want to talk about how you're going to prioritize what instruments you buy, because there's always going to be somebody saying, I want the newest, best, greatest thing. So gauge your demand. If you have measurable metrics, that's going to make your justification to your higher ups easier. It's things like how many labs currently want the new equipment, Is it going to strengthen recruitment of new faculty members or retention of faculty members? Is it going to be critical for grant applications that need buzzwords in them? Um, what I would recommend is to not be reactive, though. So, not reactive to the loudest person saying they want something, and not reactive to the brand new technology on the market. Ideally, you can create a multi-year plan. So, like I have a 5-year plan of what I think upcoming purchases will be, what I think, when I think things will need to be replaced, et cetera, so that our finance department knows, okay, this is coming up in 2 years from now. We're going to need to prioritize this. But just like adding new people, adding new technology is not always the easiest either. So this is the Gartner hype cycle for adoption of new technology. That's to say, when some new technology comes out on the market, that's your technology trigger, and that's when everyone's super excited about it. You're at the peak of inflated expectations. And then when a couple people start using it and getting through the bugs, you're down there in the trough of disillusionment. And over time, you get through the slope of enlightenment and the plateau of productivity. So you may have seen this in the very similar Dunning-Kruger effect, which is a model of an individual's self-assessment of their own competence. So I often use this to talk to grad students to say, well, you're down here in the trough of disillusionment, but don't worry, you'll make it back up. So in addition to growing hardware, you want to grow your services as well. So extend capabilities. Do things like consult meetings if you are able. In addition to training, talk about advanced workflows. Are you able to do multiplexing? Are you able to work between other cores? Can you automate things for people? Can you add an analysis component? Do you want to be the person that's involved in data interpretation? And then also you can have multiple types of service. So you can have the person that's trained on a microscope to fully use it independently, or you could do a service model where you get the information from the person and perform imaging as a full service. Alternatively, you could be somewhere in the middle and work on that collaborative type of service where you are going to be an author on the paper that you're working on as well. But I'd like to say that purchasing a new instrument is not always the right answer. It's not always the best answer, at least. Sometimes strategic process changes can be more beneficial than a capital purchase. So in this instance, let's talk about a situation where you have a rapid increase in confocal demand. Your booking time is getting longer and longer, and you have pressure from the labs to just purchase another confocal already. But before you purchase, I'm going to recommend that you analyze usage to determine if there's inefficient bookings or undertrained users that are taking longer than they need to be. Invest in a really structured confocal training. You may want to do pre-training quizzes or make them read papers. You might insist that a consult meeting is needed before you're able to train anyone on an instrument. And you can also offer image analysis support, which helps to reduce re-imaging times. So the outcome here, if you're able to do all of those things, would then be shorter wait times without adding new hardware. You'll have higher quality data and fewer failed imaging experiments that need to be re-imaged. Once you get past all of these things and you still have long booking queues and pressure from labs to purchase, then you'll have a clearer justification for future instrument purchases. So these are only short talks, so I'm going to give you a couple takeaways here. Growth should be a strategic choice, not a reaction to the loudest person. Thoughtful growth means better science and not just bigger cores. If you can, make a mission, revisit it regularly because cores evolve as science does. And your growth should not dilute any expertise. Build your expertise up before extending your capacity. Lastly, measure impact if you can. How many scientific publications have come out of your core? How many grants are using your core? Because you are providing a service that has impact, not just a service that has hardware. And at the end, the long-term success of your core is going to come from your scientific partnership with the labs, your reliability, and your institutional stability, not just the number of instruments that you have. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Corinne. That was amazing. I would like to now pass it over to Mary Lynn next.
Sorry, I need to unshare.
I was just gonna say.
I don't know where the unshare button is.
Down at the bottom in the middle. I think if you click on it, it'll unshare.
Sorry, it was on presenter view.
Oh.
All right, I think I'm off.
It's still up.
Do you guys still see me?
Yeah.
Sorry. It just says share for me.
Oh.
Could you try sharing now? Okay.
Okay.
Is it gone now?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Don't worry
No
about it.
worries.
Okay. Can you see it?
It says it's at the end of the slideshow.
Okay, hold on a second. I see it at the beginning.
It's in the presenter view right now.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. If you click on slideshow, we should be good.
Yeah, I did. Do you not see it?
No, it's again back to end of slideshow.
Oh, here we go. Hold on. Let me rush to the front. There we go.
Okay, now.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No.
Clearly, even though we are technology specialists, we still have issues with technology. So hi everybody, thank you for joining. My name is Marilyn, and with me you're going to be switching gears a little bit because I'm going to try very anecdotally describe to you how my experience has been switching from just wet lab work to becoming a core facility manager. And if the title didn't give you a hint, it has been an adventure. So, just a little bit about me. So, I have 2 degrees from McGill University, one in biology and then a master's in human genetics. And I then became a research assistant at a lab that worked on Alzheimer's disease at the Lady Davis Institute, which is where I am right now. These two experiences in my life obviously gave me most of my microscopy experience. At the end of those 7.5 years, the lab we were in shut down, and we went to become a startup company because we were working on a drug and wanted to try to bring that to clinical trial. But of course, this was right after the pandemic, and as a lot of people know, funding was kind of scarce, and that was a little bit challenging for us, and it ended up yielding not quite what we expected or wanted. And so that led me to be looking for another position after 8 months. And funnily enough, the Lady Davis was then looking for a health and safety officer. So I decided to apply and I interviewed only to later that week accept a position as the head of the cell imaging facility. And this was kind of like just a funny story because my director actually said oh, I can see you working in this position due to your background and it would be a great fit. Yet he could not really explain to me the day-to-day of working as a core facility manager. And so he actually put me in touch with my colleague Christian, who was the head at the time of both flow cytometry and cell imaging. And we kind of had this discussion, and even he at some point kind of struggled to explain exactly what happened on a day-to-day basis other than the obvious. So just to give you a little bit of a picture about our well, my core facility, I love to say that we're a total staff of 1.5 people. That is because I work really closely with my colleague Christian, and basically we double for each other. So that means I don't only do cell imaging, I also do flow cytometry, which that alone is a huge challenge. Because some days, my brain is stuck on microscopy and I'm just kind of like, what? You want me to switch to flow? Hold on a second. Okay. And also the learning curve was incredibly huge. The Lady Davis has about 400 people. We only really see, I think, about half of that because only two of those branches are really wet lab. So in reality, we see members on a daily, regular basis from about 30 labs. And at the time when I joined, we were in the process of acquiring a second confocal microscope. So now we have two. And we also have a variety of wide field microscopes that, of course, are all split in different rooms. Other labs around us also have a bunch of different microscopy instruments. So like slide scanners, the Zeiss Apotome, even like a Nicoya PhenoCycler, InQSights, and two confocal microscopes that are dedicated to intravital imaging. So I do get to kind of, assist sometimes with those fun toys, but they are not actually in the core. So, as I alluded to, right, like trying to figure out what a core facility manager does on a daily basis was kind of challenging for me. And it seems like not very many people could explain that to me. And there's a very good reason for this, I learned. So, basically, my actual title is supposedly a technology specialist. But in reality, core facility managers are shapeshifters. And what I do day to day is not just specialize on some kind of technology. I'm also a manager, a teacher, a scientist, a mentor, a troubleshooter. Some days I feel like I belong in the finance department or in the IT department, or I feel like a police officer because my users are being a little naughty. I feel like a microscope mechanic as I'm ripping things apart and putting them back together, trying to fix something. Sometimes I feel like a counselor for all the students that come through the revolving door that is our office. But I'm also their cheerleader, I'm their partner in crime, and all of these lovely things. My users also love to joke that I'm actually Batman because I spend my days in the dark in these rooms that feel like the Batcave. So, the easiest way for me, I guess, to describe to you my experience is to split it up into the 2 years ish that I've been doing this. So it's actually 2.5 years, but. So the first year, as I suggested, basically I had a huge learning curve, not only to get acquainted with all of the instruments in the core, all of their personalities and their quirks, but also to learn flow at the same time. I am very much evidently a small core facility, and so I'm in the infancy stage that Corinne just talked about. So it's all about kind of like trying to expand based on my user needs and all of that stuff, but also, right, so I had to expand my SOP base because not every instrument had a training SOP. So I focused on that at first. Another giant challenge whenever you work with people is obviously the art of peopling. And it's quite funny because I never thought I would have to go back quite so far to draw on skills to, work with people all day long. But, I used to work in, a clothing store when I was an early adult. And, I was just kind of like, whoa, throwback. But, not only in terms of, right, learning how to train users, in terms of adjusting your training style based on how they learn, obviously establishing a rapport with the users, but not just the users, also the PIs, also other staff that are in the lab. And sometimes it's really difficult. Earning their trust is difficult. And for me personally, one of the big challenges was the volume of people that I saw every day. And like I said, that revolving door that is our office door. My husband could actually tell you, that there are a large number of days I would come home and he would be like, "What's wrong? You're so quiet." And I was just like, "I just overpeopled. I spent all day long talking and I just don't feel like talking anymore." And also, obviously, with people comes managing different personalities when it comes to all of these interactions. And one of the things that I feel is really key to becoming a quote unquote successful core facility manager is number one, flexibility, but also your ability to be resourceful. obviously, right, discussing with others, making connections, which arguably in my first year, other than with my actual user base, I didn't really connect with that many people because I was busy running around and trying to learn the ropes of this core facility. So I largely interacted with, vendors. So, the technicians at Nikon or at Zeiss and things like that. But I also learned a few things from them too. And essentially, my first year, I really feel kind of can get summed up based off of deep dives on the internet, trying to find resources not only to push further my own education, but also to find resources for my user base. And as I mentioned, we acquired a second point laser scanning microscope in this time. And I really felt like, you know, with the acquisition of a new microscope, you kind of have to learn the system. It was a new software, all of those things. And even though you want it to go super smoothly, sometimes there's little hiccups and you kind of need to adjust and troubleshoot. And so for a little while, I felt like my life was trying, testing, troubleshooting, repeat times infinity, and if I'm very honest, beyond, which is both a gift and a curse. Because yes, it's a lot of time that gets put into one instrument and helping your user base like get to know it and learn it and all of those things, but it's also a gift because every single time I troubleshooted, I learned something new about this system and I know this thing inside and out now. So for that first year, I really do feel like if I had to pick one thing that was the hardest for me, that was flexibility. I always thought of myself as a very flexible person, and to some degree, that's true, right? Your experiment goes wrong. You need to troubleshoot. You need to pivot. That's all very normal for a scientist and someone who worked in wet lab. But the degree of flexibility I needed here was more than I anticipated, and it made me completely rethink how I prioritize things. And I had to completely let go of planning out my day at some point because I have the running joke: if I plan it, I don't get to touch it. So that seems to be a theme. My second year, as I kind of alluded to, right? Like I kind of focused on meeting and establishing more rapports with other microscopists. So I went to a boot camp in Denmark and met a whole bunch of people part of global bioimaging. I went to the BINA conference this fall to meet a whole bunch of people there. I joined Quarep Limi. I joined the BINA working groups, all of those things. And this was really great because it allows me to realize that even though we're from all over the world, we share similar challenges. And it's really great to kind of assess what works for others versus what works for me. And oh, maybe I should try that, right? And also just noticing that people are really supportive and kind, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. People will help you, right? Which for a small core facility, that's kind of instrumental for me. And also seeing that there's multiple approaches to running a core facility to training people, and there's no real right answer. It kind of depends, right? Um, this particular year, I also faced a lot of challenges, as Corinne alluded to, right? Like where to find funding for workhorse instruments, maintaining your current instruments, because now everybody kind of is about innovation. Um, Also, there was a glaring need for communication with upper management about the core facilities and how we were running, and is that sustainable, and should we pivot, and all of those things. I also had a fun time with some user error and misuse causing instrument damage, which is unfortunately a sad reality for core facilities, right? And we never love that. But my biggest challenge overall is lack of time. Because at the end of the day, I'm one person and I run around doing both microscopy and flow, training, all of those things. And it's kind of like time for, personal learning, time for trying to work on things that will help expand my core. There's just no time. So I actually tried implementing some time blocking, and that actually helped a little. So now that we've gone through the first 2 years, well, what are my plans for the rest? I mean, I've kind of just accepted at this point that my life is going to largely be trying, testing, troubleshooting, and deep dives on the internet and talking to people. Um, but although, like, I do have a few things that have popped up in terms of need. So, for example, establishing SOPs for microscope maintenance. As we move forward with these aging microscopes, how am I going to make sure that they're operating properly, right? My user base is also kind of inching towards spectral imaging and DNA damage experiments, so we're growing in that area as well. I would love to have time to make a microscopy fundamentals class because I have a lot of users that don't have a lot of experience in microscopy and then jump onto a confocal, which I can, like you can imagine, it's not exactly ideal, and there's a gap there. Also, like always, just trying to expand my core facilities in terms of analysis tools and resources, because since I am a one-person show type of thing, we don't have a lot of resources there. And also, it takes time, it takes money, all of those wonderful things. I'm constantly looking for solutions to challenges and to expand and push the boundaries of my core facility based on my users' needs. And as I mentioned, I have aging instruments. So hopefully, right, we can shuffle some of that out if it's no longer useful to us and embrace whatever comes in that's new. So overall, this entire thing is a learning process. Even though like I realize that there's challenges and I might have overcome part of them for now, right? It's very much a learning process, trying to talk to people, see what works for them, what works for me, and just trying to trudge on. So that is me done. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much. Now I would like to invite Andy for his presentation.
Hold on a second. Let me just stop share. There you go.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen one? I'm assuming it's gonna
We are
swap
on
the other way
slide.
around. Yep.
It's on
It did this
presenter
last time as
mode.
well. Yeah. There we go. Should that be better?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, tough act to follow after Corinne and Marilyn, but I'm really happy about what they spoke about because it left some leeway for me to kind of tack on to all the things that they discussed and some of the problems and some of the solutions. I have experience with both of their kind of topics of conversation as a core facility of one and pretty much a newish core facility manager. But today I have been thinking a lot about the role of core facilities in the research community. And this is something that's a real passion of mine. And there's been a lot of discussions recently about the role of staff scientists and the role of staff scientists in research. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this today. And again, like Corinne said, like this is, and Marilyn, like this is anecdotal. These are my experiences. But my talk is going to be about developing core engagement and trust from caveman to community member. So as I said, there's no two cores or institutions alike. These are my opinions. These assessments and ideas that have worked for me. You may disagree or have tried some of these things and found that they didn't work. And if that's the case, I'm really sorry. I hope that there are maybe some other ideas in here that you could potentially try. But these are the things that I have found and I've asked my community have worked in kind of integrating me beyond being a man who sits in a cupboard. So just for some context, my experiences with core facilities, when I was at AstraZeneca, I spent a year as part of my undergraduate degree. I used a lot of their core imaging and genomics personnel and learned a lot from those people. I am forever grateful to the University of York, the mass spectrometry team, the imaging and cytometry team, genomics and molecular interactions. These are people who taught me what it's like to work in a core facility, and also like gave me the skills that I have now. And then when I was at Boston Children's Hospital and also doing some work in the Beth Israel, I used the light microscopy facility at Boston Children's, and Mark Shimone, who's now at University of New Hampshire, was a great friend there. And then John Tiggs at the flow cytometry core at Beth Israel also really imparted a lot of knowledge to me. And so these are places where I felt as a researcher, I engaged with these people. And I think my relationship with them has lasted because I treated them when I was a researcher as if they were incredibly valuable members of the research community. And I think that's something that has lasted and has been instilled back in me now that I am on their side of the fence. So my facility, this is what we have. It's a lot of work to maintain. I have just started to get a 0.4 FTE assistant. So we're at 1.4 people for a lot of instruments. And so I spend an equal amount of time running around, fixing things, training. I think last count, in the 2.5 years I've done this job, done 450 people's worth of trainings in 2 years. So it's been pretty busy. But it has been a joy pretty much the entire time that I've been doing it. And I think the reason why is because when I arrived at Brandeis, I began as the man in the cave. And I think over time, I've been able to develop that into being a part of the community and having that community support me back. So this is a model that my friend Harry and I, who is the current manager at the IDDRC at Boston Children's Hospital, this is an idea that we've been talking about for a little while, is this idea of the role of core facilities in the research environment. And we've been calling it the 3C model. So the basics of this is the cave. You have some microscopes, they're in a room, and your job is to turn the lights on and to train users, and then they come and they use your instruments. So the arrow is pretty much unidirectional. They come from their group, they use your instruments, they don't talk to you, they don't engage with you, you train them, they take care of themselves. For me, that's not particularly rewarding. Then we can move on to kind of this second step, where we refer to it as the core. Here you have technical expertise and advice that is heeded by your users. It's a bit more of a two-way street, but potentially it's limited in its scope. You're able to introduce some ideas, some techniques. You can explain to them, oh, there's this actually other, new software that's available for you, or some analysis method, or an actual like microscope that could do your research in a more efficient way. You're providing these people now not only with access to a microscope, you're providing them with opportunities. And you're involved to an extent in the research, and you might get some acknowledgements and maybe an authorship. And then I think here is where I personally really want to end up. This is going from the cave to the core to the community hub. This is where now we are embedded within that research community, and there is an added value and satisfaction for those facility staff. And here you have not just a one-way intermediate kind of discussion, it's an iterative process. You have this cycle of people communicating with you, you inform them, they go back to their lab, you come back, and you build better science as a consequence, relying heavily on the technical expertise of those facility staff. The culture of technical expertise then spreads across your research community. They don't want to just come and do their own thing. They want to make sure that they're doing it in the best way possible. And then you also become a bit of a facilitator. You see people doing one type of experiment and you realize that there are people in another group, maybe they don't talk to each other. You're able to connect those people and therefore make the science at your entire institution be better. And I think that's really what we're kind of aiming for. So how do we get there? This has been a long and winding road. And I think firstly, we kind of need to talk about some of the things that Corinne and Marilyn spoke about, which is what really matters in a core facility. And there's a lot of things, and they've already kind of highlighted most of them. So providing instrumentation that is suitable for your user base, making sure the instruments are actually functional. You want a user base that's confident and competent, rigorous experiments and data. You want to be a very good communicator. And also the finances obviously matter in this line of work. You likely have all of these skills. These are the things that Marilyn pointed out. These are the things that you need to be able to do in order to be able to actually function as a facility manager. And this bottom one, I think sales, someone talked about doing tours, like we're selling things. We are selling a way of doing research at the end of the day. And realistically, I always refer to myself as I was a good bench scientist. I was fine, but I really liked working with people. And at the end of the day, it's the squishy thing that operates the microscope that's actually going to define how well you integrate into that research environment. And I wouldn't feel the way I do about Brandeis if it wasn't for the people who are here. And the people operating those microscopes are your portal into the community and having them involve you in the research as a whole. So how do we get there? Ask people about their research. It seems so simple. But I've been in places where I used a facility and the person didn't want to know what I was doing. They trained me how to turn on the instrument, use it, fine. They didn't want to know what I was doing, and that's totally fine. But start the conversation from a point of genuine curiosity. Scientists love to talk about their work. We're all scientists. We all like talking about what we do. It's cool. And I found that the more questions I ask, the more people tend to come back and say, hey, that thing that you asked me about, we actually looked into that. Let's talk more about it. And it begins to integrate you in the research program. This is one of the biggest ones for me. I don't like waiting for people to ask for help. I keep an eye on those booking sheets. I see who's using the microscopes. I see who's going to be on any given day. And I've had some experiences of people who are either afraid or they lack confidence in their ability to ask for help. Those are the people who you can have the most impact with, and potentially those are the people who will champion you later. I had a student who at one point was imaging really late at night, so I stayed late. And I popped in, pulled back the curtain. Hey, what are you imaging? What are we doing? Turned out they were using a system that was pretty much completely inappropriate, and we were able to cut down their imaging time from 6 hours to about 30 minutes. That is hugely impactful for that person. And then they tell other people that, and that was really helpful for me. Give them better data, or their time back, or both. I like to provide advice for a lot of people in the form of a question. So I like to pop in, see what people are imaging, ask them the question, what are we imaging? Oh, this looks really good. Would you mind if I take a look at the settings? Would you like, are you happy with the images you're getting? Would you like a little bit more resolution? Would you like some speed? Would you like some signal? I think one of the things that has really kind of always proved to be the most beneficial here is people who image very, very slowly, but could potentially do the same imaging within 3, 4, 5 times as quickly while still getting actually the same quality of data. I think that's one of those things that when you give people their time back, that's when they begin to start telling people, hey, those settings that our entire lab has been using, you should go and talk to Andy. He might be able to make it a little bit quicker for you. Also talking to people about alternative techniques, what their total plans are for analyzing. I don't have the time to have pre-consultations, so I kind of do it as we go, as I see people imaging. And as I mentioned, like saving people time seems to be the biggest winner. When I first started, I attended quite a few lab meetings from different labs. This was one of those things that not only got me FaceTime in front of these people, but also I think they really appreciated having someone take an interest. And also it was fun. I got so much satisfaction from going and seeing imaging data, not just at the point of the microscope, but actually seeing the figures at the end of it. And I think that was one of those things that was a lot of fun. I also am deeply indebted to the people who championed me from the start. Finding those people who really appreciate what you're able to do, and then having those people tell other people, not because I asked them to, but because they wanted other people to engage more with the facility. The amount of engagement I have and the number of people I know here increased dramatically just by having 3 or 4 postdocs and PhD students who really engaged with the core. And those champions, those people are absolute gold mines they're just absolute gold mines for improving your integration within a community. Seek out feedback. Surveys, I think sometimes we overdo it with the surveys. I think they can be very effective. They have to be very targeted. You need to, make sure that the questions you're asking are going to give you meaningful, quantifiable answers. And I tend to separate the kind of questions I'm asking between trainees and PIs because they often want really different things. And I want to ask, trainees, what can I be doing better at the systems? And PIs are kind of more 30,000 foot overview questions. But that feedback and trying to action some of the things that have been requested has been really impactful. I know Marilyn mentioned that she wanted to start a course. This has been probably the best bit of feedback that I've had, is that my users have felt more empowered through access not only to one-on-one trainings, and this is a quote from some feedback that I requested from some users, that workshops have helped PhD students gain confidence in their abilities and helps them get over the barrier of trying new things. People are always asking me now, like, oh, should I try this? Should I try this? Whereas I think before I was the one suggesting it, and now they're coming to me with the ideas, and by giving them the knowledge, they feel more empowered in that situation. A good friend of mine, John Tiggs, who runs the Beth Israel flow cytometry core, once told me that core facility managers are the bartenders of the core facility world, or of the science world. In light microscopy, it might be because we actually sometimes spend time polishing glass, but we also get to hear a lot of people's stories. You have a lot of people when you're training who, or when they're imaging, maybe they're experiencing some difficulties, and for whatever reason it might be, core facilities seem to be a place where people feel safe, where they want to share with you their experiences, their troubles, they ask you for advice. And I think this is one of the things that I've experienced from both sides of the coin. Like, I felt it when I was a PhD student and a postdoc, but they bring us their problems and we try our best. So, in the winter, I bake cookies, I provide coffee, and there's seltzer in this fridge, and There's a snacks normally in the drawer, and then now I've made the space so that we can have the big TV. I think one of the moments I felt most proud was during the Winter Olympics. I had this TV just showing the Winter Olympics all day. And I came out once from my office, I'd shut myself away, opened the door, and there was a bunch of people in the office. None of them were working. That was totally fine with me. The best part about it was that they were all just there talking and enjoying the fact that there was a facility that was a nice place to be. Communicate regularly and effectively. This is another thing that I initiated when I started. I don't know how many people read my newsletter. I send it every 2-3 months. I know that some people do because they sign up to through the forms that I submit. They add themselves to events in the calendars. Even if I get 20% readership, I think that's fantastic. And it's been a way in which I can share lots of information, and people can kind of pick and choose what they want to read from that newsletter. And this is something that I know the PIs have really appreciated, is kind of getting these large scale overviews of what's going on within the facility, what instruments are we trying, what are the issues, and trying to summarize that in kind of small chunks of information within this. Obviously, communicating too much, you start to annoy people. So you got to find the right balance for your institution. Networking for the community. My relationships with my engineers and vendors are just unbelievably important. As a consequence, sometimes, depending on the vendor, I might get a little bit of special treatment. We might get some expedited uptime on some of our instruments when they break. And that's fantastic. I love working with those people, and they make sure that the community here is up and running all of the time. And also, typically, if you're a facility manager, you're the point of contact for the vendors. Even when there are PIs who want to buy their own systems, small systems, large systems, they're probably going to ask you to help them facilitate. And so an institution's relationship is only as good as the one that you have. Sell, sell, sell. Advertise your facility in a way that gets people in the door, and kind of think outside the box. I forced my way into like PhD open days and like undergraduate open days and potential donor visits in a way that I could sell the facility at a scale that isn't just for individual researchers, but at a scale that is thinking about my facility in the context of this entire institution. So I've been invited to give talks at kind of these quantitative bio lunches. We very nicely received some funding from the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center, and then Brandeis's alumni magazine wanted to write about that. And then a student actually asked if they could do a little internship with me. And she's really interested in science communication. And one of the things that I really wanted was a poster highlighting all the instruments we have. And this is the current state of that poster. Stole the idea from Jörg Nicolaus at Yale, so thanks, Jörg. But we have begun to develop our own poster for the Brandeis facility. And so these are the things that I thought worked, but I did ask some colleagues what they thought anonymously. I didn't need to stroke my ego in any way, but we asked them what they thought had kind of worked for our facility and what made them trust me, trust the facility, and engage with the facility at a level that they hadn't done before. And the first thing that they said was the workshops and the courses. They really gave people empowerment for their trainees, guidance on instrument use and selection, maybe taking them from a point scanner and moving them to a spinning disc, saving them a lot of time and potentially money. Technical expertise, changing the types of experiments, changing the design of the experiments, improving them using technical expertise, accessibility of me, open door policy, people being able to ask questions whenever they wanted, the level of communication and bringing in equipment. These were the kind of things that came up the most common. And then what needs improving. And this is kind of brings me to Corinne's thing. Even more training opportunities, and they want more of it. And that's, I think, the difference between the cave. The cave, maybe you don't need an expansion because people come and they go, they come and they go. But when it becomes this iterative engagement with the facility, that's when people realize the worth that staff scientists and core facility personnel bring. And that's how we can begin to think about expanding. And I'll end with, this is the logo that Gemini generated for the facility. We like a nice forced acronym. Brandeis actually up to our facility has this beautiful kind of lane of birch trees, and the Brandeis logo is this owl. And I really wanted it to be not just the core facility, but actually a hub for the research community. And so I want it to be named the Brandeis Imaging Research Community Hub, and I wedge this in wherever I can. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to all our speakers. We have about 6 minutes for questions. Feel free to unmute yourself or put your question in the chat if you have any questions. We have a question from Ambika in the chat. Could you talk a little bit about funding for cores received independently versus from grants received by non-core investigator universities?
Hi. Should I be asking my own question? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be anonymous. But yeah, that's my question. I just wanted to know how the core gets funded and sort of how, yeah. Thanks.
So I think this depends kind of on country also, right? But for me in Canada, right, I'm affiliated, for example, with a hospital, and that hospital has a foundation. So this is one way we can kind of get funding that is not based off of grants, right? And I do know that certain core facilities like have these entire things where like with their foundation, they have a dedicated like little spot where people can donate funds to maintain equipment and things like that. We're not at that point yet, but I hope we will be eventually.
Okay,
I'll,
thank you.
I'll say that at my institute, we have an endowment, so we're pretty lucky in that way. The cores are very heavily subsidized by the institute. However, to ensure that all investigators are kind of getting the coverage that they need, we have all PIs need to have at least R01 to be able to use the facilities. We have chargeback rates based on a large calculation. But users also have internal support from the institution.
Any other questions?
So I'll jump in here with a question that was in the chat and kind of build off of it. So there was some interest in learning a little bit more about the institutional support that each of your cores have from a marketing standpoint, but also from an administrative standpoint. So if any of you are up for commenting on that, I think everyone would be interested to hear.
So for me, I came here to Van Andel Institute in Grand Rapids, Michigan, from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. So at UW-Madison, there were like over 100 cores, and they all operated independently, and everybody, there were multiple light microscopy cores that each had different chargeback structures because of different subsidies that they were using. So that seemed very disordered. And then when I came here, all of the cores were under an Office of the Cores umbrella. They were really tightly linked together, which I think has made a lot of benefit for the researchers here, because not only am I able to work with my staff in the core, but I also can work really, really closely with the other cores, the histology core, the flow cytometry core, genomics core. We have a bioinformatics and biostatistics core, which is really helpful. We do have a specialized person in the finance department that works with us, as I mentioned in the chat. We didn't have that when I first joined, and it kind of was a little depressing because finance was like, y'all are failing. What's going on here? You're never getting more than 50% back. And I was like, well, that's just how cores work. But I don't think that administrative personnel always understand that. So we were able to get a person embedded into the finance department. She understands, she comes to meetings like ABRF. IT and administration have been a little bit different, but they have also been really helpful because we have the support of a team, of course, and not just me as a single person.
Yeah, we're moving more towards a model like Corinne describes. When I arrived, it was very much kind of, I was expected to handle all of those things. I'm very proud to say that I hold the record for the quickest PO achieved through finance relative to value of the amount, because we had 48 hours. And it was, again, that being part of the community, engaging with the finance team, as well as kind of the research team, that allowed us to make sure that got through as fast as we did. But we are moving towards that model where a lot of these kind of interactions with the various core facilities we have are more centralized, and kind of vertical integration with the various administrative sides of things. But our core, a lot of it is subsidized by various faculty retention packages that cover things like my salary. But were those packages to disappear, I think now you've established a need for this, and so the institution would be committed to supporting it anyway.
Yeah, so for me, it's kind of similar in the sense that, like, our institute was not built with core facilities in mind. So basically, we kind of popped up as a need kind of revealed itself, which is why partly my microscopes are in, like, 3 or 4 different rooms. But, well, as I already said, like, right, me and my flow cytometry core facility manager, we work really closely together. We share an office. But also, like, a lot of the kind of organization between different core facilities in our case has just come from a willingness from the different managers to kind of interact with each other and try to work this out to help researchers as best we can. And we do really want to kind of move towards that same model of, like, us being under that same umbrella and kind of being able to have a PI that, like, kind of connects with all of us type of thing. We do not have specific staff that's dedicated to us. And I do have to say that in my case, having been a lab manager in this institute for 7.5 years prior to taking on this role eventually, like, that was a huge advantage for me because I knew who to talk to for absolutely everything and anything that I needed. And, like, sometimes even my flow core colleague, like, he didn't know, and I was like, oh, I know who to go see. Hold on, I'll get it done. So that's a huge advantage. And also, like, people knowing you, right? They want to help you. So when you step into kind of this bigger role type of thing, you have that support network already helping you. And, like, my head of IT, he realizes kind of like that core facilities are a little bit on a different level, right? With our technology and all of that stuff. And so he helps us out as much as he can in order to, like, make it less painful for us. So that's really great.
Like most things, core facility, it's all about who you know and who you talk to, right? And luckily, we have the BINA community to pull us all together and hopefully share some knowledge. So given that we're at time, I'm going to cut us off here, though I know this conversation could go on pretty much indefinitely, and hopefully we will revisit it in the future. I hope everyone will join us next month at the end of March for our next community conversation, which is going to be about supporting image analysis in core facilities. So please join us then, and thank you very much to our speakers. We really appreciate you joining us today.